I should have seen the signs. Looking back, they were all there, hidden in plain sight, but hindsight has a way of mocking you when it's too late. My wife, Lauren, and my best friend, Mike, had always gotten along well, too well, in retrospect. I chalked it up to their shared sense of humor and mutual love for late-night board games. If only I'd known what those smiles and stolen glances really meant. It all started to unravel one unassuming Friday evening. Lauren and I had been married for 8 years, and while our marriage wasn't perfect, I thought we were solid. Mike had been my best friend since college, and the three of us often hung out as a trio. On this particular night, we invited him over for dinner, as we'd done countless times before. The evening began like any other. Mike brought a bottle of wine, Lauren cooked her famous lasagna, and we spent hours reminiscing about old college stories. But as the night wore on, I noticed something odd. Lauren seemed unusually animated when talking to Mike, her laughter a little too enthusiastic, her hand lingering on his arm a fraction too long when she passed him a dish. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. They'd always been close. Mike was practically family. But when Lauren disappeared to the kitchen to fetch dessert, I caught the way Mike watched her go. It wasn't the gaze of a man admiring a friend's wife. It was something more primal, more intimate. My stomach churned, but I didn't say anything. Confronting him right then felt ridiculous. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into an innocent moment. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew faster than I could control. The next few weeks were a blur of suspicion and self-doubt. I started noticing little things that had once seemed insignificant. Lauren's phone, which she used to leave lying around, was now always with her. She'd smile at her screen sometimes, quickly locking it when I entered the room. When I asked who she was texting, she'd shrug it off with vague answers. Just work stuff. Or, a friend from college. And then there were the excuses. Lauren suddenly had more work meetings, in the evenings, more errands to run on weekends. Once, she even came home with her hair freshly washed and styled, claiming she'd stopped by the gym. It didn't add up. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. So I did what any man in my position would do. I started paying closer attention. I went through her phone when she was in the shower. Nothing incriminating, just texts with her coworkers, family, and friends. But one name stood out, Mike. Their texts were casual, filled with inside jokes and memes. Still, nothing explicitly damning. But then, one evening, I noticed a text thread that had been deleted. It was the only conversation missing from her phone. My blood ran cold. A week later, Mike invited me out for drinks. I accepted, hoping the familiarity of our friendship would calm my racing thoughts. We met at our usual dive bar, and for a while, it felt like old times. But as the night went on, I couldn't help but watch him more closely. Was he avoiding eye contact? Did his laughter seem forced? "You've been quiet tonight," Mike said, raising an eyebrow as he sipped his beer. "Something on your mind?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." But inside I was screaming. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but the fear of being wrong held me back. If I accused him and it turned out to be nothing, I'd risk destroying our friendship and my marriage. So I kept quiet, swallowing my doubts along with another swig of beer. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Lauren was out late again, claiming she had a meeting with her boss. But when I called her office, the receptionist told me everyone had left hours ago. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. This was it. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to follow her the next time she left the house. It felt dirty, like I was stooping to some pathetic level, but I needed to know the truth. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The very next evening, Lauren announced she had to meet a colleague about an upcoming project. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing me on the cheek. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her car from a safe distance. My heart pounded as I tailed her through the city streets. She finally pulled into the parking lot of a small boutique hotel. My stomach churned as I watched her get out of the car and head inside. For a moment I froze, unsure of what to do. Then, like a man possessed, I got out of my car and followed. The lobby was quiet, dimly lit, and the receptionist barely glanced up as I walked past. I scanned the room, my pulse hammering in my ears. And that's when I saw them. Lauren and Mike, sitting in a corner booth at the hotel bar. Her hand was on his, their heads bent close together in whispered conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the intimacy between them was undeniable. My vision blurred with rage and disbelief. I wanted to storm over, to demand an explanation, but my legs felt like lead. Instead, I stumbled back to my car, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. The truth was out there now, staring me in the face. But what was I supposed to do with it? And could I handle the consequences of confronting them? The answers, I knew, would come soon enough. And they wouldn't be pretty. The image of Lauren and Mike together in that dimly lit hotel bar haunted me for days. My anger boiled under the surface, threatening to spill over every time I looked at her. I couldn't shake the betrayal, but I also couldn't bring myself to confront her outright. Not yet. I needed more. I started keeping a closer watch on Lauren. She was careful, I'll give her that. Her phone was always locked, and her explanations for late nights or extra errands seemed plausible enough. But now, every little thing she did felt like a piece of a puzzle I couldn't quite complete. One evening, I decided to check her car. After she went to bed, I crept outside with a flashlight. My hands shook as I opened the glove compartment and center console. Receipts, a spare pair of sunglasses, nothing unusual, until I found a folded piece of paper wedged beneath the passenger seat. It was a receipt from the boutique hotel bar. 2 cocktails, dated the night I'd followed her. My stomach twisted. The next morning, I confronted Mike first. He was easier to reach, and frankly, I didn't trust myself to keep my cool with Lauren. I called him, keeping my voice calm. "Hey Mike, can we grab a beer tonight? There's something I want to talk about." He hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "Sure, man. See you at Pete's at 7? "Perfect," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought of facing him. At the bar, Mike greeted me with his usual grin, but there was a tension in his eyes. We ordered our drinks, made small talk about work and sports, and I waited for the right moment. Finally, I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I followed Lauren the other night." Mike's face went pale, and he froze mid-sip. "What?" "To the hotel," I continued, my voice shaking. "I saw you two together." He set his beer down slowly. "Look, man, it's not what you think. Don't insult me," I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. "I saw her hand on yours, the way you were looking at each other. How long has this been going on?" Mike ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "It's not like that. I swear. She's been going through something, and I was just trying to help her." "Help her?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "By sneaking around behind my back? Drinking cocktails at a hotel bar?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "She came to me for advice about your marriage. She said things haven't been good between you two." My chest tightened. "And your advice was to get cozy with her over drinks?" "I wasn't trying to," he began, but his voice trailed off. I shook my head, disgusted. "You're supposed to be my best friend, Mike. You've known me for years, and this is how you repay me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't wait to hear it. I threw a 20 on the table and walked out, the air outside feeling heavy and suffocating. When I got home, Lauren was waiting for me in the living room, her expression guarded. "Mike called," she said quietly. I froze in the doorway, my fists clenching. "And? He told me you confronted him," she said, standing. "Can we talk?" "That depends," I said, my voice icy. "Are you going to lie to me, or are you finally going to tell me the truth?" She flinched, her composure cracking. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult my intelligence. I followed you, Lauren. I saw you with him at the hotel. I found the receipt in your car. How long has this been going on? Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then she sighed, collapsing onto the couch. It's not an affair, she said, her voice trembling. We've been talking. That's it. About us. About how distant you've been. Distant? I repeated, incredulous. You're blaming me for this? I'm not blaming you, she said quickly. I needed someone to talk to. And Mike was there. So you decided to air our problems to my best friend? I said, my voice rising. And what, flirt with him while you were at it? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to get so complicated. I stood there, staring at her as my anger simmered beneath the surface. If it's just talking, why delete the texts? Why sneak around? She didn't answer, and her silence spoke volumes. I turned and walked upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind me. For the next few days, the house was filled with tension so thick it was suffocating. Lauren tried to talk to me several times, but I couldn't bear to look at her. I'd trusted her. I'd trusted Mike. And now, everything felt like it was crumbling around me. But I knew one thing, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days following the confrontation with Lauren were a blur. My anger simmered just beneath the surface, and every interaction with her felt like walking on shards of glass. She tried to bridge the growing chasm between us, cooking my favorite meals and leaving apologetic notes around the house, but none of it softened the knot of betrayal tightening in my chest. I couldn't ignore the nagging questions that kept me awake at night. If Lauren and Mike were only talking, as she claimed, then why the secrecy? Why the hotel bar? Why the deleted texts? The inconsistencies gnawed at me, and I knew I wouldn't find peace until I had the full truth. My opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Lauren left for what she claimed was a late-night grocery run. Suspicion flared, and I decided to follow her. Staying a safe distance behind her car, I trailed her through the city. My heart raced as she turned into the parking lot of a small diner, one far enough from our neighborhood to avoid running into anyone we knew. She parked and stepped inside, and I followed moments later. The diner was dimly lit, with red leather booths and a long counter that gave it a retro feel. My eyes scanned the room until I spotted her. My stomach dropped. She wasn't alone. Mike was sitting across from her in a booth near the back, his head bent close to hers. They were talking in hushed tones, their expressions serious. I clenched my fists, my anger surging. I wanted to storm over and confront them right then and there, but something held me back. Instead, I slipped into a booth a few rows away, close enough to watch but far enough to remain unnoticed. Their conversation was low, muffled by the chatter of other diners, but I caught snippets here and there. He's suspicious, Lauren said, her voice trembling. Mike leaned back, running a hand through his hair. We're being careful. He won't find out. My blood boiled at his words. Careful? Find out? The implication was clear. Whatever they were hiding, it was more than just a friendly relationship. Lauren glanced around nervously, and for a moment, I thought she'd spotted me. But she quickly turned back to Mike, lowering her voice further. I strained to hear, but their words were lost in the ambient noise of the diner. Frustration bubbled inside me. I needed proof, concrete evidence of whatever was going on. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I'd always considered spying beneath me, but desperation has a way of eroding your principles. With the help of a friend who worked in tech, I installed a small GPS tracker in Lauren's car. It felt invasive, wrong even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. The tracker provided immediate results. Over the next week, I monitored her movements, and what I discovered only deepened my suspicions. She made frequent stops at locations that didn't align with her usual routines, a secluded park, an unfamiliar apartment complex, and the diner where I'd seen her with Mike. Each time, her excuses for being out felt thinner and less believable. By the end of the week, I had enough. Armed with the GPS data and the memory of their meeting at the diner, I confronted Lauren again. This time, I refused to let her deflect. I know you met Mike at the diner, I said, my voice steady but cold. And I know this has gone beyond just talking. Lauren's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. You followed me? Don't try to turn this on me, I snapped. You've been lying to me for weeks. Maybe longer. So tell me the truth, Lauren. All of it. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it again, but then her shoulders sagged. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. I never meant to hurt you. What wasn't supposed to happen? I demanded. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. Mike and I, we kissed. A few times. But it didn't go further than that, I swear. I stared at her, disbelief and rage coursing through me. You expect me to believe that? After everything I've seen? The hotel bar, the diner, the deleted texts? Don't lie to me, Lauren. I'm not lying, she insisted, her voice rising. I thought about it. About more. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't cross that line. Her words offered no comfort. Whether or not they'd gone all the way didn't matter. The betrayal was already complete. My next confrontation was with Mike. I called him, my voice tight with barely contained fury. We need to talk. Now. To his credit, he didn't try to dodge me. We met at a park, the tension between us palpable. How long? I asked as soon as he arrived. It wasn't what you think, he began, but I cut him off. Don't. Just tell me the truth. How long have you been sneaking around with my wife? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. A couple of months. But it wasn't serious. It just happened. I took a step closer, my fists clenched. You were my best friend, Mike. How could you do this to me? He looked away, shame etched on his face. I'm sorry. I screwed up. I'll never forgive myself for it. Good, I said, my voice cold. Because I'll never forgive you either. The truth was finally out, but it didn't bring the relief I'd hoped for. If anything, it left me feeling hollow, as though the foundation of my life had been ripped away, leaving nothing but rubble. The betrayal had fractured my world, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be pieced back together. The days after my confrontations with Lauren and Mike were a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and sadness swirled inside me, making it nearly impossible to think clearly. My once stable life now felt like a fractured mirror, with every reflection showing a version of me I barely recognized. Lauren begged for forgiveness, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Each time she said she was sorry, I felt a fresh wave of anger. She'd shattered my trust, and no amount of apologies could piece it back together. One evening, she approached me while I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. We need to talk, she said softly. I didn't respond, keeping my gaze fixed on the screen. But she sat down beside me anyway. I know I've hurt you, she began, her voice trembling. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I need you to know that I love you. I never stopped loving you. I turned to her, my expression blank. You have a funny way of showing it. Her face crumpled, and tears spilled down her cheeks. I was stupid, and I made a horrible mistake. But it didn't mean anything. Please let me fix this. Let me fix us. Fix us? I said, my voice bitter. How do you fix something that's already broken? You betrayed me, Lauren. You betrayed everything we built together. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Her touch felt like a lie. I need time, I said, standing up. Don't expect me to forgive you overnight. If ever. While Lauren's pleas for reconciliation continued, Mike's attempts to reach out dwindled. He sent a few text messages apologizing, but I ignored them all. The thought of seeing his face or hearing his voice made my blood boil. He had been my best friend, the one person I'd trusted implicitly, and he'd thrown it all away. One afternoon, I received a text from Mike's girlfriend, Rachel. She and Mike had been dating for over a year, and though we weren't particularly close, we'd shared a few double dates. Her message was brief but pointed. "Rachel, can we talk? I think you need to know something." Curious and slightly apprehensive, I agreed to meet her at a nearby coffee shop. When I arrived, she was already there, her expression grim. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "What's this about?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Rachel took a deep breath. "I found out about Mike and Lauren. He confessed everything." I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again. "Why are you telling me this? Isn't it obvious by now?" "Because there's more," she said, her voice low. "Mike has a history of doing this. I found out he's cheated on me before, multiple times, and Lauren wasn't the first married woman." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Mike's betrayal wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a pattern. "I thought you deserved to know," Rachel continued. "You're not the only one he's hurt." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her revelation sinking in. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet but firm. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know what to do with this information, but thank you." She nodded, her expression sympathetic. "You're not alone in this. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." That night, I confronted Lauren again. "Why didn't you tell me about Mike's past?" I demanded, holding up my phone with Rachel's texts. Lauren looked startled. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "How could you not?" I snapped. "You trusted him enough to sneak around with him, but you didn't bother to find out who he really was?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence between us was deafening. The final blow came a week later. I'd been considering my options, torn between staying in the marriage for the sake of what we once had and walking away to preserve my sanity. The decision was made for me when I found an email from Lauren to Mike. She tried to delete it, but it was still in her trash folder. In the email, she begged him to stay in her life. "Lauren, I can't imagine losing you completely. Please, let's talk." It was the last straw. I printed the email and left it on the kitchen counter for her to find. Then I packed a bag and walked out the door. I didn't tell her where I was going, and I didn't answer her calls or texts. I needed space, time to think, and most importantly, time to heal. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but each day felt like a step toward reclaiming the sense of self I'd lost. Lauren and I spoke occasionally, mostly about logistical matters. She begged me to come home, to give her another chance, but I couldn't. The damage was too deep, the wounds too raw. As for Mike, I never saw him again. Rachel told me he'd left town, likely to avoid the fallout of his actions. Good riddance. The betrayal had shattered my world, but it hadn't destroyed me. In time, I found strength in the pain, a resolve to move forward no matter how difficult it seemed. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I deserved better than the lies and deceit that had defined the last few months. And I would never settle for less again.